If someone were to ask you what your favorite game of all time is, what would you say? Maybe you'd say that your favorite game is Kingdom Come: Deliverance II. You'd tell me that you struggle to keep up with the fast pace of today, that you find yourself wishing things were more simple, that you desperately longed for the day that everything would slow down. You'd say that Kingdom Come: Deliverance II gave you that break that you'd so long yearned for. That the game drew you in with its intimate yet quirky writing and how it let you take a time machine to 1400 Bohemia. That you cherished how it fostered a sense of accomplishment as you learned what it took to be a knight. That you were shocked by how fulfilling it felt to step into the shoes of Henry, lose yourself in the character, and experience the incomparable feeling of growing alongside one another for hundreds of hours. Or maybe you'd say that your favorite game is Red Dead Redemption 2. You tell me that you spent your childhood playing pretend cowboys with your friends, reading about the Pony Express, wondering what life was like for the men and women of the frontier. You loved how Red Dead Redemption 2 allowed you to take that fascination to the next level, experience the rugged nature of the West for yourself, and set foot in an America that was long gone by time you were born. You were obsessed with Rockstar's attention to detail, awestruck by the gorgeous open world, and felt a strange connection to Arthur Morgan, a character who, on paper, you couldn't relate less to. Or maybe you'd say that your favorite game is Horizon Forbidden West. That, as an adult, you found yourself overwhelmed by the state of the world, that you found solace in picturing a different future, that in recent years, sci-fi has given you a chance to break away from the chaos, breathe a little, and feel a tinge of hope that someday, maybe everything will be okay. You love how Horizon shows you that beauty can always persist, even in the face of an apocalypse. You love how Horizon shows you that, even after our systems erode, people will long live on, creating new systems, new communities, a new normal. You love how the game showed you that, no matter what, there's something to hope for. And it helps that you also think the combat is pretty frickin' sweet. Or maybe you'd even say that your favorite game is Crimson Desert, that you loved reading The Hobbit in school because of how alive Tolkien made the world feel, that you loved Game of Thrones because of how it was able to make you feel the same way that reading The Hobbit once did, that you loved Skyrim because it was the first game to allow you to step foot into one of those worlds and experience it for yourself, a truly awesome moment that you'd spent the last 15 years chasing. An experience that you'd convinced yourself you would never have again until you booted up Crimson Desert for the first time. You fell in love with the game's beauty, got lost in the game's scale, obsessed over the different cultures, and for the first time in a long time, something reminded you of reading The Hobbit for the first time. Regardless of what your answer may be, for a lot of you, one thing is for certain: your answer is going to be an open world game. But why is that? What draws us to these games over others? What makes the open world specifically feel so magical? It's a question that's plagued my mind for years because, truthfully, I'm just like you guys. All of these feelings I just talked about, they're my feelings that I felt myself, feelings that the open world games have helped me cope with. I am obsessed with this genre. As a matter of fact, out of my 10 favorite games of all time, 8 of those are open world games and the other 2 have open sections. But open world games aren't the only games to deal with these feelings. The Witcher 2 is not an open world, but it allowed me to step into the shoes of a character similar to how Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2 did. Final Fantasy XVI isn't an open world either, but it provided a rich fantasy world reminiscent of Skyrim or The Hobbit, just like Crimson Desert. But the thing is that it usually doesn't matter. The simple truth is that, even for themes I can find elsewhere, no game resonates with me the way that the open world game does. But why is that? What is it about the open world specifically that makes games feel unlike anything else in the world? Well, if you ask me, the answer's simple. Open world games are magic. I mean, how else could you explain that feeling of getting lost in an open world? How else could you explain the memories crafted in a place that never truly existed? In creating these amazing open worlds, developers ended up with something greater than the sum of their parts. They created magic. To prove that magic is real and that open world games are overflowing with it, I want to walk you through how open world games have shaped me as a gamer and the magical moments that paved the way to today. Together, we'll walk through some stories highlighting how open worlds have shaped how I view games and the world at large, in the hopes of finding the secret to the magic of open world games somewhere in there. This is a topic I'm super excited to talk to you about because I think my experiences are far from unique, and I think you'll see a little bit of yourself in this video too. But before we get too far into it, I really do want to know, what's your favorite game of all time? Let me know in the comments. Now, when I was growing up, we couldn't afford much in the way of video games. As a matter of fact, for the first few years of my life, the only game console we owned was a PC that my brother constantly hogged so he could play StarCraft. As a consequence, I started playing games when I was 3 or 4 years old, but for the first few years of my life, the only games I could get my hands on were whatever games my uncle had on his Sega Genesis, a console that was already retro when I first started gaming in the early 2000s. That means my first games were X-Men, Paperboy, and Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Admittedly, I wasn't a big fan of any of them. They were all way too hard for me at such a young age. I thought X-Men was awesome, but I'd die after only a few minutes of trying. I thought Sonic was cool, but only when my brother would put up with me long enough to play as Sonic so I could play as Tails. The only game I could make any progress in was Paperboy, but I mean, playing as a Paperboy is the lamest thing that you could possibly do. As a result, I thought video games seemed cool, but they didn't interest me as much as, say, my Jakks-Pacific WWE figures. I loved those things. It wasn't until we moved into a house I fondly remember as our big blue house when I was 5 years old that my love for video games really began to blossom. When we moved into this house, our family made friends with our next door neighbor, and the daughter of the house, Stephanie, ended up becoming my babysitter. It was the first time that I was at Stephanie's house that I saw one with my own eyes. Nestled up under their living room CRT TV was the console I'd seen on all the ads, the one I kept hearing my brother talk about, the Nintendo 64. I then did what any kid in my position would do. I begged her to let me play it. And she did. She went over to the console, grabbed the only game I ever recall playing at her house, Super Mario 64. She blew off the cartridge, slotted the game in the system with a satisfying click, handed me the controller, and slid the power button into the on position. It was then that I heard the line that would forever change my life.
It's me, Mario!
It's a me, Mario. I can close my eyes and see it now. The elasticity of Mario's face on the menu screen, the bright blues and greens of Peach's castle, the yahoos of Mario jumping around the castle grounds, the bushiness of the trees as you climbed them, the grandeur of the castle itself, the ripples like water in the paintings as you jumped in them. It all happened so quickly. One moment I thought games were just okay, and the next moment, the only place I ever wanted to be was exploring the open world of Super Mario 64. I don't remember Stephanie babysitting me too many times after that. If I had to guess, it might have had something to do with how enthusiastically I'd beg to play her Nintendo 64 even when I wasn't being babysat. As a result, I did not beat Super Mario 64 at the age of 5. Nowhere close. For the span of what was probably only a small handful of weeks, I'd occasionally go over to Stephanie's, roam around Peach's castle, play through Bomb Battlefield, and have a grand old time. It's funny to think back on such a small moment in my life as being so instrumental in the formation of my person, but it was. Super Mario 64 single-handedly altered the course of my life forever. How did Nintendo do that? When I looked at Super Mario 64, I saw everything that it meant to be a kid, everything that it meant to be me. Bright, beautiful colors, a funny main character with memorable catchphrases, and freedom. Freedom to explore, freedom to experiment, freedom to be myself. It's hard to remember this as you grow older, but when you're a little kid, everything can feel like a restraint. Everywhere you go, someone's telling you what you can't do. No climbing, no roughhousing, no jumping around, nothing. There were not any no's in Super Mario 64. In Super Mario 64, I could run, jump, roughhouse, explore to my heart's content. Super Mario 64 gave me a feeling I had never had before in my little life. The feeling of pure freedom. How did Nintendo know? I mean, they certainly must have done research, but research can't show you how it feels to be a kid. Research can't make you feel that feeling. How was Nintendo so successful at bringing out the emotion that felt so oppressed to my 5-year-old self? I'm convinced it must be magic. In the blink of an eye, a couple years pass. I've said goodbye to the big blue house, I'm now closing in on 7 years old, and now my older brother has grown up enough to be my primary babysitter. Oh yeah, and we finally got our first gaming console.
Citizens of the world, we are in deep doo-doo. Aliens. There's a lot of them, and they're meanies. As peace-loving humans, we must take up arms. And by arms, I mean guns. United, we will form a giant can opener, and we will open A giant can of whoop-ass.
Halo Combat Evolved.
If Nintendo is what made me fall in love with games, then Xbox is the reason that love never faded. With my mom regularly working doubles at a nearby restaurant and my older brother still massively obsessed with StarCraft, that meant I was free to play the Xbox as much as I wanted. It would take some time before I took full advantage of that freedom though, because while we had some games that I liked, we didn't yet have any that I truly loved. Halo, Fusion Frenzy, and Blinx the Time Sweeper were major staples of my game library at the time. And I mean, I thought these games were pretty cool, especially Blinx, but they all felt either a bit too restrictive or a bit too hard for me. I still got way more enjoyment out of my wrestling figures than out of any of the games that I owned, so I never really found myself glued to the screen. But that all changed when two games came into my possession: Tony Hawk's Underground and True Crime Streets of LA. Tony Hawk's Underground was exactly what I needed at the time. It was engaging enough to keep me hooked, but not so engaging that I was spending an unhealthy amount of time on the TV. But more than that, the game offered the perfect balance of freedom, challenge, and self-expression. It was broken up into smaller maps, but this game had a very fun open world that made exploration a blast. But honestly, it wasn't just the freedom of exploration that made this game so memorable. Thug was my first encounter with a character creator. I found it so cool to be able to see an adult version of myself ripping on a virtual skateboard across this open world. Seeing what I one day could be created a feeling of aspiration. It made me think that one day I might be able to shred the same way my character could. It made me think that maybe one day I too could get revenge on my ex-friend Eric for stealing my footage of me hitting a McTwist over a flying helicopter. I know, that's silly, but it's also real. Through the representation I felt through Tony Hawk's character creator, I was able to dream bigger, wilder dreams than ever before. How do you explain that? To add to this feeling, Tony Hawk's Underground was also the first game that I ever beat. I almost beat it entirely on my own too, but I couldn't pull off the 900 in Moscow. I tried so hard, man. I tried for multiple hours, across multiple days. I tried right before going to bed and as soon as I woke up. I tried while crying, and I tried while screaming at the TV. Ultimately, I couldn't pull it off, and frustrated, I asked my older brother to jump in. I made it so far on my own. I was so close to the ending. Asking for help killed me. It was the last thing I wanted to do. But my wants didn't matter. The truth is that I just needed a hand. When I came to that realization, I decided at that young age that I'd rather accept help and succeed than fail on my own. How do you explain that installation of such a core ideal at such an impressionable age? Sure, great game design can explain why I stayed hooked, but there's no way that the game director had any idea that it would shape me into the man I'm proud to be today. There's no way he knew that, in directing Tony Hawk's Underground, he'd help create a dad his son can be proud of. But that is what happened. And that's exactly what happened with so many of you with other open world games. Without those games coming at the perfect time, who would know what you might look like today? For so many of us, we're better for the open worlds we escaped to when we were younger. So how do you explain that? It must be magic. Now, a game that I loved even more than Tony Hawk's Underground, but was never able to beat, was True Crime Streets of LA. Now, you may be wondering how a 6-year-old got his hands on such a mature game. Well, I have a confession to make. Remember in my video, The Most Glorious Game Ever Made, when I described the time I lied my way into getting Grand Theft Auto San Andreas? Well, that wasn't the first game I deceived my way into playing. I didn't lie much as a kid, but I lied my ass off if it meant I could play more video games. What can I say? A kid had priorities. Anyway, my brother and I would ask my mom for money and walk to the nearby grocery store because they had a game rental section. It was here that they allowed me, a 6-year-old, to rent True Crime Streets of LA without as much as a question. So really, it's their fault. I knew my mom would have questions though, so I kept the game hidden until the next time my older brother was babysitting. After a few days of waiting, the time finally came. My mom went to work, my brother was locked in on StarCraft, the Xbox was in the living room begging for my attention. So I grabbed the game, sprinted to the console, popped it in, and was whisked away. Immediately, True Crime Streets of LA was unlike anything I had played before. The game looked and sounded just like the movies my mom said I wasn't allowed to watch. The game came with even more freedom than I'd experienced before. I could steal cars, fight people, arrest people, plant drugs on people, you know, all the things the average 6-year-old dreams of. There was so much to do, so much to see, it was almost overwhelming. And that feeling wasn't just a result of my inexperience either. The world truly was massive, even by today's standards. As a matter of fact, that game featured a 1-to-1 scale recreation of LA, an insane feat for a game running on a 2001 hardware. This seems like the perfect time to say that we need a new Sleeping Dogs game. Sleeping Dogs was the evolution of true crime. I just need to vouch for that real quick. What happened next can only be described as magic. For the first time ever, I was glued to my screen. I, the same kid with ADHD who couldn't stay focused on a single thing for longer than 5 minutes, found myself glued to True Crime Streets of LA for 8 straight hours. I remember keeping track of the time because I knew when my mom would be home and had to make sure that the game was away by time she got there. I struggled to stay tuned in to 30-minute TV shows, but here this game was, able to keep me hooked for 8 straight hours. I love driving around the huge city, exploring the inner workings of Los Angeles, and getting truly lost in a game world for the first time. That feeling of being completely absorbed in a game is one I've cherished my entire life. I've experienced it probably hundreds of times by now in games like Sleeping Dogs, Assassin's Creed 3, The Godfather, and Skyrim. But the first time I ever felt it was with True Crime. That's the magic right there. When the fruit of your labor produces a feeling so beloved that people spend their entire life chasing it. When your hard work results in something that people want to lose hours of their life to. As far as I know, that's magic, and I think you know that too. That feeling you get when you find an open world begging you to walk down every alleyway, jump off every cliff, and dive behind every waterfall. That feeling that begs you to set up a home away from home in a virtual world. That feeling is pure magic. Now, let's fast forward a bit to something I wasn't sure I'd ever talk about online. 7 years pass. I'm now getting ready to enter high school, and due to circumstances outside of my control, I no longer have a home to call my own. Now, don't let me make things seem worse than they are. I was better off than most displaced people. For a handful of years, I found myself bouncing from couch to couch, friend's house to friend's house, lucky enough to have friends that support me, and even luckier still to never be without a roof over my head. By all means, this period in my life could have been far worse, but that being said, this was still the hardest part of my life so far, and honestly, I still struggle to talk about it today. During this time in my life, I was surrounded by friends, but I felt effectively alone. I didn't have much more than I could carry in a suitcase or two, which meant that I had my clothes, my school supplies, and of course my Xbox 360. I told you a kid had priorities. At this point, everything I knew, everything I relied on from my old normal was effectively gone. I mean, I didn't even have my wrestling figures anymore. The only comforts I knew from back then that I was able to carry with me into the completely new life I now had were my friends and my Xbox 360. It was during my first year of homelessness that I played perhaps the most life-changing game I have ever played, Red Dead Redemption. I spent my after-school hours glued to the screen. I loved the Old West, I loved how being a cowboy made me feel, and I especially loved John Marston. I would do impressions of him constantly, talk about how amazing the game was, and revel over how well he was portrayed. I mean, I was super annoying about this game. I felt like, in a way, I was John Marston, even though we couldn't be less alike. Through John, I escaped to the Old West. I had a home again. I had a place that felt like my own. It probably wasn't the healthiest attachment, but I hooked onto that game as a guiding light through some of my darkest days. When the game neared its end is when I loved it most. It's funny too, because this is easily the most boring part of the game. It's the part where you just get to live life on the ranch, tending to the farmstead with your wife Abigail and your son Jack at your side. I know it might sound pathetic, but for a moment, this game was able to make 13-year-old me feel like I had a family again. I was so happy that John Marston seemed to be getting a happy ending at a time where I felt like I needed hope. You might see where this is going. Then the mission came. The one where Edgar Ross shows up with a gang of Pinkertons at your doorstep. I knew the end was here. I felt it. I was ready to lose the ranch, fight away the Pinkertons, and ride off into the sunset. But as you may know, that's not what happened. Not for John, at least. I put my family on the horse, said my goodbyes, and opened the barn doors to the line of men waiting for me. He's gotta get out of this, I thought to myself. The good guy always wins. Then the game entered Deadeye mode, and I just knew it was over for those sorry sons of bitches. I marked the first couple of guys, and then... I'm riddled with bullets. It doesn't take a doctor to see that there's no way John is making it through this. I was overcome with emotion. I don't know how long it lasted, but I know that I wept and wept and wept for what felt like hours but was likely only a few minutes. I didn't care if anyone heard me, I just needed to let it out. This wasn't me mourning the death of John Marston, this was me mourning my old normal, the way I used to live, my family. When the ending came, I thought that what I needed was hope, that what I needed was something to make me feel good. That isn't what I needed. I needed a release, and if I did not get one, I don't think it's crazy to say that I might not be here right now recording this video. John Marston's death gave me that release. It allowed me to feel all that hurt, sadness, and loneliness that I'd so desperately try to pretend wasn't there. Sure, you can point to Rockstar's amazing writing and stellar open world creation as to the reason why I was able to escape so effectively to the world of Red Dead Redemption, why I was so moved by the death of John Marston. But there's no way in hell you can point to any of Rockstar's ideas and say that they are what allowed me to process a trauma I so desperately tried to avoid. That is the magic of the open world. The ability to lose yourself somewhere, become someone else entirely, create a life in a fictional world, and in doing so, somehow end up finding yourself. The magic of Red Dead Redemption's open world allowed me to find myself at a moment when I had never been so lost. It wasn't necessarily that I wanted to escape to the world of Red Dead Redemption, but it was the fact that Red Dead Redemption allowed me to escape from my world that made this game so pivotal. But what if there was a world so inviting and made me want to escape to it? What would that one look like? Fast forward to today. I'm not exaggerating when I say I now have a life I used to only dream of. I have a family I couldn't be more proud of, including the world's best wife and perhaps the best son to ever be born. I have basically every gaming console I could ever want and a PC so powerful it would make 13-year-old me vomit. I even have a well-paying day job, but admittedly, I also have a deep-seated fear of mass unemployment, hence why I'm working so desperately to try to make it work as a full-time content creator, but that's beyond the point. The point is that, by all accounts, I'm living a life I previously could only dream of. Ironically, that happy life makes it a bit harder to completely lose myself in the magic of a video game today. It still happens, but the occasions are fewer and further between, maybe once per year if I'm lucky. Escapism is just not something I need anymore, so it's hard to truly escape. What was once a crutch has now become a luxury that can only be afforded if my son's in bed, my chores are done, and if a game is good enough. That's what makes Crimson Desert so goddamn awesome. Yeah, this was all leading up to a Crimson Desert hype video, who could see it coming? Leading up to the launch of Crimson Desert, I was consumed with anticipation. I mean, I'm not the first to say that this game looked way too good to be true. I mean, it has WWE combat, swordplay, gliding, dragon riding, farming, ranching, homesteading, large-scale wars, trading, multiple playable characters, and more, all jammed into one game. It seemed insane, and it still seems insane when you think about it, but I was hopeful that it could defy the odds and really be as good as it seemed. Then the day came where the review embargo lifted, and it seemed like maybe it was too good to be true. Critics lamented how large the game was, how clunky the controls felt, how hard puzzles could be, and I began to be afraid that the game would suck. Maybe that tempering of my expectations was exactly what I needed though, because the game dropped and boom, man, I was blown away. Crimson Desert just has so much going for it. The scale is so massive that I'm at 90.8 hours according to Steam, and I still have only barely left the first region. The regions that I have seen are jam-packed with culture, and their cultures vary wildly from one another, giving this rich sense of history throughout the game. The puzzles are challenging, sure, but they're deep, and they ask the player to go out and engage with the wider world in a way that most games are afraid to. The combat, man, the combat is so fun, and it makes me feel like I'm playing with those Jack-specific wrestling figures all over again, except now those figures can do cool knight shit too. The exploration of the world is so fun, engaging, and rewarding that I like to spend entire nights just seeing where the wind takes me. Pearl Abyss created what can only be described as an evolution of the open world game, and in doing so, they've allowed me to escape again. Except this time, I'm not escaping from a world in which I don't want to live, but instead I'm escaping to a world I desperately want to visit. That is the magic of the open world game. I feel like I'm killing this. The magic of the open world isn't just escapism, nor is it personal investment, nor is it freedom, challenge, personal expression, aspiration, or the personification of childlike whimsy. The magic of the open world is all of these things and so much more. The magic of the open world is how its exploration shapes its players, not just when they're playing the game, but for dozens of years after. The magic of the open world is how it can provide the player with a place in which life seems worthwhile at times when it might not seem worthwhile outside of the game. The magic of the open world is how it can touch on all of the things that define us, motivate us, and make us human. I don't think I'm alone when I say that there's no way I'd be the person I am today without open world games. Without the magic these games provided, I could be way worse off than I am today, or maybe not even here at all. So with that being said, thank you Super Mario 64, thank you Tony Hawk's Underground, thank you True Crime Streets of LA, thank you Crimson Desert, and most of all, thank you Red Dead Redemption. Truthfully, I don't know where I would be without you guys. Open world games have made me me, and I will forever be thankful for that. But enough about me, man. How have open world games shaped you? Let me know down in the comments, let's talk about it, and just remember, content like mine wouldn't be possible without viewers like you. Thank you.